When it comes to the Pokémon that people consider the worst or most hated, there's one group that's almost always brought up: Univa's elemental monkey Pokémon. Pansage, Panpour, and Pansear are usually described as ugly, and honestly, I don't see it. Each gen has its fair share of uggos, but they don't get nearly as much hate as Univa's monkeys. I actually find them quite cute. They're simple yet charming, with small flicks of design elements that indicate their type. They're such inoffensive designs that I'm honestly amazed that they still get so much hate. Sure, they may be less cute when they evolve into Simisage, Simipour, and Simisear, but I wouldn't call them ugly, just goofy. And if Alolan Executor and Wiglet taught me anything, it's that people are more than capable of liking and even loving goofy designs. But wait, isn't Simisear the most hated Pokemon of all time because it got last place in some poll? Yes, Simisear has admittedly become rather infamous for getting last place in a Pokemon popularity poll exactly one time. But besides the fact that popularity polls can never be entirely accurate, it's important to consider the context of the poll in question. It was the Japanese-only Pokemon General Election 720. The winning Pokemon would get a special in-game event distribution during Japanese showings of the Volcanion and Magearna movie. With that in mind, it's honestly a good thing that Simisear didn't win. It's a common Pokemon that doesn't need a distribution, although ironically it became so well known for coming in last place that it did end up getting its own distribution later. Still, we can clearly see the effects of this poll's context in play when looking at the top 36 spots. There was still some general favoritism, with common but still incredibly popular Pokemon like Pikachu, Sylveon, and Charizard breaking into the top 10. And Greninja got the first place spot, even though it also would have been a relatively easy Pokemon to get in-game. But of the top 36 Pokemon, a whopping 26 or 72% are legendary or mythical. Not that these Pokemon aren't well loved, but some, including Arceus hot on Greninja's heels in second place, definitely got extra votes this time around in hopes for the promised event distribution. We can tell because popularity polls generally see a much healthier mix of common and legendary Pokemon. For example, in 2020's Pokemon of the Year popularity poll, Arceus didn't even make it into the overall top 30 ranking. As for 2021's results, well, let's just say Simisear got more votes than even Arceus itself. Make of that what you will. All this to say, the monkeys' designs really aren't as bad as people make them out to be, and Simisear very likely isn't the least popular Pokemon of all time. But I actually think there's another reason entirely that makes Simisear and the entire group of Gen 5 elemental monkeys severely underrated. Modern Pokemon games have become notorious for drawn-out tutorials and hand-holding that lasts for the majority of the games. Comparatively, Black and White finish up their tutorials quite quickly, ending in Striaton City. That may seem like a lot, but Route 1, Accumula Town, and Route 2 are very fast-paced. Even better, there's no backtracking at all. Striaton is where the monkey business really kicks off, even when it's not entirely obvious. But that's part of the tutorial's brilliance. It's seamlessly integrated into both the gameplay and story, so it often doesn't feel like a tutorial at all. For example, before you can challenge the gym, you have to battle Charon at the trainer's school. In this battle, Charon has an Oranberry equipped on his starter, showing players how held items work, rather than just telling them. But this also serves as an example of gameplay supporting the narrative, as it helps establish Charon as the more strategic battler of your childhood friends. While Charon's entire team uses held items by the time you get to Twist Mountain, Bianca only ever uses items like potions, even in the post-game. But back to the monkeys, who enter the picture in the Dream Yard. Visiting here before beating the gym is optional, and if you do stop by, you can't make it very far because of a tree blocking your path. But an NPC here gives you one of the 3 elemental monkeys. Specifically, you get the one that's disadvantageous against your starter. As a tutorial, this teaches players that it's beneficial to speak to NPCs. They also learn that they can find helpful Pokémon by traversing off the beaten path. Although Black and White's Unova is linear in layout, players always have a bit of wiggle room, and are rewarded for taking advantage of it. For example, although you can't enter the Pinwheel Forest proper until after defeating the normal master Lenora next door, the forest's exterior is fair game, and home to fighting-type Pokémon. The Dreamyard's Gift Monkey serves the same role, since the Striaton gym leader you face is the one whose monkey has a type advantage against your starter. This opens up two typical complaints. First is that the Gift Monkey is the only Pokémon with a type advantage you can get before fighting the gym leader, and the second is that the gym leader battle is in singles format. The first complaint centers on how Unova's Routes 1 and 2 don't feature a lot of Pokémon, just the normal-type Patrat and Lillipup and the dark-type Purloin. Although some fans have complained about this lack of early-game type diversity, I find it very effective. The Striaton Gym is meant to teach players about type matchups, but that becomes a lot more difficult to do if players end up catching a bunch of Pokémon of different types that are neutral to the gym leaders. Another set of problems would come about if there are too many Pokémon before the first gym that have a type disadvantage or advantage over the leader. The former would make the gym too difficult, especially since it's the first one. The second would make it too easy, and neither would properly introduce the balance that comes with type matchups. They can work in your favor and against it, not just one or the other. This is part of why more recent Pokémon games seem easier compared to older ones, and it starts with your rival. Now that starter Pokémon have a stab move right away, you'd be almost guaranteed to lose your first rival battle unless they choose the Pokémon weak to yours. But then you have no difficulty mopping the floor with them. In order to keep Bianca and Sharon's first battles against you relatively balanced until they get a chance to catch Pokémon of other types, Striaton's gym leader teaches you about type matchups instead. Teaching this concept in a seamless yet unforced way is no easy task. Regardless of one's personal preference regarding too much or not enough early game type diversity, Black and White's limited early game availability serves the purpose of helping direct players towards using the monkeys. This in turn helps teach players about types in a way that's controlled without holding the player's hand. Players still have to explore to get the monkey and think about how they can use it. When it comes to battle, they're fairly balanced. They're serviceable, but not so strong to the point that people would cry foul about how the games just give you OP Pokémon without you needing to do anything. The monkey is also made more special by having a type that has thus far been rare, rather than commonly available. Black and White never force players into using the monkey, but instead gently encourage them to, by setting up the early game in this fashion. Speaking of forced, there are 3 Striaton gym leaders, each one using a different elemental monkey. It's not surprising that people insist that this fight should have been a triple or rotation battle to show off Gen 5's new battle variants. However, I disagree. Both triple and rotation battles require the player to have a team of at least 3 Pokémon. Although it's certainly possible to have 3 or more party members by that point, it would still be forcing players to flesh out a bigger team, even though they could very well get by with just their starter and monkey, or even less if they want to go the solo run route. I can't help but think about this whenever I see someone wrongfully say that Black and White require the player to use Reshiram or Zekrom after catching them. This is always done to complain about how games shouldn't force players to use certain Pokémon if they don't want to. Although the circumstance they're complaining about doesn't exist, the point itself is fair. I can only imagine how much people would hate being forced to level up 3 or more Pokémon before the very first gym, especially with Gen 5's decreasing experience gain system. The first gym being a triple or rotation battle sounds sensible on paper, but it would play out very poorly in practice. The only thing Black and White force you to do is fight Sharon in the trainer's school before facing the gym leader, and it's with very good reason. It teaches you about held items that will come in handy before your very first gym battle. Even better, Sharon gives you some orange berries after defeating him, so you can use them right away. So players are learning about held items, and they're about to have a premier primer on type matchups. But what about abilities? Players have probably already noticed in the status menu that their starter Pokémon has an ability, but Overgrow, Torrent, and Blaze are rather vague about how and when they activate. Many players, seasoned and new alike, don't realize when their starter is in the ability's range because there's no indicator, and the difference in damage output can often be hard to tell too. Other Pokémon may have given players a chance to see abilities more clearly in action, such as Lillipup with Pickup's in-battle effect, but the monkeys take intentional ability synergy a step further. Each elemental monkey has the ability Gluttony. Thanks to the earlier battle with Charon, players understand that a Pokémon eats their Oran Berry when they're low on health. They'll also see that Gluttony encourages the early use of a held berry. It's a pretty basic synergy, but this is just the start of the player's journey. In order to pull off more complex strategies down the line, players need simplicity and structure at the start. Univa's monkeys give players that structure, allowing them to catch a glimpse of what's possible when taking into consideration a Pokémon's type, moves, held item, and ability together. And the game never spells it out for them. The player has to get the monkey, pay attention to how held items work, and draw the connection between the Oran Berries and the ability Gluttony on their own. But the fun doesn't stop there. Once you earn the gym badge, Fennel asks you to move deeper into the dream yard, and to do that, you need to cut down that tree. While it's worrying to have to put Cut onto one of your Pokémon, realize that the Elemental Monkey's best normal-type move they learned by level up is Scratch. Not Slash, Scratch. Cut is a much better normal-type move, making the monkeys a perfect choice to teach the HM to. Even if you choose to fight the gym without the gift monkey, it's still here for you to use HMs on. In fact, this is the only time in the entirety of Black and White that using an HM is required, and that's because this is still part of the game's tutorial. And since HMs are otherwise never required on the overworld, this part of the tutorial can't be cut out. Older players may know what HMs are and how to use them, but people who are venturing into the world of Pokémon for the first time don't, so it's crucial that they learn about HMs as early as possible. The same goes for type matchups, held items, and abilities. Because there will always be new players with each new Pokémon game, tutorials like this are mandatory. So why not make the most of it by allowing the tutorial to tell players a bit about their rival's character, and teach players about the game's basic mechanics through seamless, practical experience. After Fennel tells you about the Sea Gear and Dream World, rest in peace, Black and White's tutorial finally comes to a close. But there's still more use you can get out of the elemental monkeys. All three can be caught in Pinwheel Forest, so you can use them to round out your party if you'd like, even if just for the time being. And in Castelia City, an NPC offers you an evolutionary stone for the monkey of your choice. This introduces stone evolutions while also respecting the player's freedom. As someone who always gets Panpour as a gift in the Dreamyard, but prefers catching a Panseer to use, I've always appreciated that I could pick a Firestone instead of being locked into a Waterstone to match my Panpour. And you don't even have to use the stone to evolve the monkey if you don't want to, just like you don't have to keep using it after battling the gym leader, and you didn't have to use it against the gym leader at all either. These cute little guys are never a bother, just useful little monkeys who help tie the Pokémon series' best in-game tutorial segment together. Pansage, Panpour, and Panseer form the pillars that hold up Black and White's fantastic early game, an early game that is often forgotten or misunderstood in the grand scheme of Pokémon game pacing. The fact that the monkeys can keep HM cut off your other Pokémon should be reason enough to elevate people's opinion on them. But more than that, they're very well thought out Pokémon in general. whose types and abilities synergize in such a way that players can much more easily learn about the game's mechanics. All this, combined with genuinely pleasant designs, make them some of, if not the most, underrated Pokémon of all time.